Hi, I'm Christina Cameli. Welcome to the Harmony and Light Quilt-Along. It's a series of videos where I'm going to show you from beginning to end how to make this quilt. And even if you're a newer quilter, I think you've got the skills to make it. The whole quilt is made from these little triangular blocks, and it's easier than it looks. But the effect is pretty great. I really love how geometric the design is. And when I set out to make it, I thought I could use the geometry, but also make color a really big part of the quilt. And I also thought about sort of how to make it easier for the quilter. And I made it so that there's not a whole lot of points that you have to line up. So when you're looking at the quilt, there's these white diamonds that kind of move through the quilt, but they don't have to meet each other exactly. So hopefully that takes a little bit of pressure off of you as a quilter. You still get great results without having to work too hard for it. So let's talk about the color, the fabric, like how you start if you're going to make this quilt along with me. This is the fabric that I've picked. Most of it I've designed, so that was my priority, was working with fabric that I love and that I enjoy. So definitely look for the things that make you excited to quilt. And when you're doing that, let's talk about sort of the colors that you're going to use. So my quilt works through the whole color wheel, but not evenly. So I've got some red, I've got some orange, some yellow, green, blue, and purple, but I've only got one yellow. And I've only got one red, and it's a pretty muted red as well. So the color wheel is more heavily balanced towards the orange, the purple, the blue, and the green. So for most of the colors, the ones that I'm accentuating, I'm not just picking one, I'm picking multiple. And you'll see that for most of the colors, I'm choosing a wide value range. So I've got something very dark, say in the orange, and I've got something very light in the orange. And I'm also paying attention to the prints. Some of my fabrics read more as solid, and some of them are more busy and catch the eye more with the print. So I want a little bit of both in my quilt to give it that sense of movement and sparkle. So I look for prints, but also things that soften the print so it's not so busy with tons of prints. And I also like it when I can see my quilting on the finished quilt. So that's another nice thing about having things that are almost solid or solid. So that's part of why the metallics are in here. Some of it is that there's already metallic details on this saguaro fabric. But the other part is these give some really bold color, like a solid. And because they catch the light, because of the shininess to them, when I go and stitch on it, you get really powerful stitch definition. You can really see the stitching in those areas. And I like that on my quilts. So as you look at the quilt behind me, I think you might notice that some of the colors have more of a value range and some of the colors have less. So for instance, in the green area of the quilt, and I did choose kind of a lot of greens, I don't have any that are really dark, you might notice. I do have a pretty light one, but I don't go all the way into the dark value. This gives a softer sort of watercolor effect. And if you like this better than the parts of the quilt that have more variety in the value, then you might soften, you might narrow the value range that you pick for your fabrics. I like the way that that having the stronger values in there make it more dynamic. For most people, that just gives the quilt the wow factor that may be hard to describe why it's there. Some people say value does all the work, but color gets all the credit. And I really do see that in my quilts as well. So if you can, get some lighter ones, get some darker ones in there. One thing I thought about with my fabrics was kind of making sure that they move well from one color to the other, that there's not a big jump from, say, the blues to the purples, that it felt like there was a soft transition there. And also that whatever color was at the end of my progression could loop back around and kind of close the circle and look okay with the other side of the progression, so that I can I can start anywhere with my colors once I go to lay out the quilt, and I can sort of any color has a friend next to it. I think that's a good way to describe it. And the way we'll use that is that when we go to make our blocks, we're going to use colors that are kind of near each other in our color progression to get that sense of harmony and to get that sense of kind of soft movement progression through the quilt, so that you don't have to, say, plan the whole quilt out in advance. You'll be able to choose fabrics according to where they are in your color progression. And then once you go to lay them out, they should work pretty well. They should harmonize pretty well to give you a nice movement of color throughout the quilt. Okay, so have fun picking out your fabrics. And once you've got them, I'll show you how to start cutting them.